Next thing I need to think about is the hydraulic handbrake setup in the car. Obviously my situation is a little bit different than the average person's, so we need to keep that in mind. But I got a few things up our sleeve that we've been working on for a little while now to make this car with the handbrake way better than I've ever had with any of the other cars, including the 180. So before we jump into making the handbrake setup, let's have a chat about two things that I really want to work on with this handbrake. One thing I've always struggled with the 180 is not having enough power to properly push the handbrake. I'd always have to sort of struggle to get the rear wheels to lock. And one of the reasons that I always kept the C18 seats is because I have to have some movement to put upper body movement into pushing the handbrake enough to actually get the rear wheels to lock. So I didn't want to have that with this car. That's one of the things that I didn't want to have to deal with at all. The next thing, the second thing, is I want to make sure that it's nice and close to the wheel. One of the things I notice about with drifting is it's not so much when you go into the corner and you expect to pull the handbrake. It's more those times when you're chasing really close and you need to quickly get to the handbrake because something has happened that you didn't really expect, or you're following the car in front, they slow down a bit more than you thought. You really need to be able to get to the handbrake nice and quick. You need it to have nice and an easy to get to lever. And that's the other thing that I want to do. That wasn't too bad in the 180, but I want to make sure that I have it even better in the new car. So to do that, to solve number one, we have this. This is a VH44E. It's very different to the ones that you can buy for $100 on eBay. This one cost quite a bit. You can't get them made anymore. They can only rebuild them. We got it from Hydro Boost in Echuca. And what this is going to do is it's a vacuum brake booster. It's going to allow us to plumb in the hydraulic handbrake to the front here. And then this booster will multiply that force to about 3.4 times what I put in out to the rear calipers. So this is a bit different to the brake booster that you'd normally have in a car, because normally in here you'd have a rod that comes from the brake pedal. So this one actually uses hydraulic pressure in and creates hydraulic pressure out, so that we can use the hydro and create the hydro like you normally would, except it's routed to the booster and then the booster creates the extra boost. So that's going to solve my issue where I have to put all of my upper body strength into pushing the handbrake. And it also means that we can move the handbrake to a better position, touching on point two, that I don't have to have it necessarily in a position where I'm strong. I can have it instead in a position that I can get to nice and easy. So I really want to drive the car like this and have the hydraulic handbrake there. That way I can get to it nice and easy. And yeah, it'll be a lot easier to drive. I'm going to feel a lot more confident in the car. So now that we've got this, we need to actually set everything up in the car so that I can go through with what I've said.
Not bad.
Is it hitting the chair?
It's hitting the seat, yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's only just hitting it like that.
Yeah. Do you have a hand?
No.
Good, you've only got one that's holding the camera.
Yeah.
Well, here's the handbrake all mounted up. As you can see, it's actually mounted to the seat rail. The reason for that is the position that I wanted, being the fussy bitch that I am, for the hydraulic handbrake was half in between no man's land between the seat rail and the trans tunnel. The trans tunnel is made of really thin metal and was going to need a fair bit of bracing, but the seat rail is actually pretty strong and made out of decent thickness metal, so much easier to weld to that. Also looks a bit neater, and I think it looks pretty cool. Things about it, things to note is there's a couple of different positions. There's got welded captive nuts, so we can move that forwards and backwards. Obviously, since this is mounted to the seat rail, this will actually move with the seat when the seat's moved forward and back, which is another plus. So if I decide to move another hole back on the seat, the handbrake's in the same position, same length as it would have been previously. The other thing is Dad had to kind of re-engineer the entire top part of this handbrake setup, because originally, obviously, it was a pull handbrake, and we couldn't just flip it around because this master cylinder would have ended up inside the gear shifter. So Dad's had to re-engineer the pivot point from down the bottom here to up here. And then obviously we've had to flip that also on the actual stick side for the hydraulic handbrake. So Dad's done a killer job on this. So now it's time to put it on in the car, see how I like it, give it a push, see how it feels. So the handbrake's all mounted in the car now. It's looking really good in there. It's nice and tidy, just tucked down there next to the seat rail. So it works quite well for me because it's really close to the steering wheel, as you can see, which works quite well with my hand situation. We still have to do something about the top of the handle here, make some kind of pedal or plate for me to push on. You can see there's a bit of space down there, and those bolt holes we can move it backwards and forwards. So we're going to have to mount the booster now. That's the next thing on the list. Oh, I forgot to shoot any time-lapse footage of this, but the vacuum booster for the handbrake's all mounted in the car now. It's basically sitting in behind the driver's seat in the rear passenger footwell, and it's tucked up nice and close to the roll cage. Nice and out the way. You probably wouldn't even see it, much of it, when it's actually got the seat in the car. So that's all looking pretty good. We're going to run some lines from the hydraulic handbrake here around to the booster, and then the booster lines will go through somewhere here to the dual calipers. So that's all looking pretty good. It's got this bracket on the front, and if we switch around to the other side, we can see that there's another bracket on the other side here. Uses a single stud off the back, and then we've tapped 2 threads into the plate there that the roll cage is sitting against, and that is going to be nice and strong now. It's kind of tucked out the way here. You won't really see it once the seat's in, so all looking pretty good. That's the second part of this hydro setup. Now time to talk about the third, which is the dual caliper mounts. So here's our dual caliper setup. You can see we've got the standard brake caliper at the back here, and then we've got the one that we welded on at the front. This setup uses standard brakes on front and back, so no need for a Willwood. We'll just need to use, in this case, 330i brakes. And it all looks pretty good. Come around the back here, you can see where it was welded on. It's all black in there, so it's a bit hard to see on camera, but yeah, come up pretty good. I got the bracket from SXS Concepts, and it's a laser cut bit of steel that they send out, and then you weld it onto your standard BMW arm. The only thing that's a bit difficult is this arm is cast, and cast is a bit of a bitch to weld. So I got a mate that's got some experience welding cast, and he welded that on for me because there's a procedure to it. You got to preheat it and cool it at a certain rate and clean it up a certain amount. So I left that to him. It pretty much sits over the top of the ABS hole for the wheel speed sensor, and yeah, all on there now. All I have to do is connect the lines to it. Can't use standard BMW lines because it actually comes straight out of that port in there and goes straight into the arm, so that won't work. We'll have to get custom lines made up. So all it needs to be plumbed, put back in the car, and it should be good to go. So probably the last thing I'm going to do in this video is mount up the reservoir for the hydraulic handbrake. I don't really want to put it in the middle of the car and right next to the handbrake because I'm going to have to actually pour brake fluid into it at some point, and I'm really, really bad when it comes to actually pouring fluids into things and not getting them everywhere. And I don't really want to get brake fluid all over my nice seats. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount it on the pillar. So I'll just mount it in here on the pillar, and it should work pretty well. The battery's fucked though, isn't it?
What?
The battery.
No, I mean the other one.
Well, that's the reservoir all done. Mounted to the pillar of the car there with 2 riv nuts, and all looks pretty good around the roll cage there. The only thing is I might have to get a 45-degree fitting on the bottom just to get around the intrusion bar. But otherwise, everything's looking pretty sweet. All I'm going to have to do now is open up the door and pour it in, rather than having to like clamber over seats and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, pretty happy with it. So that's pretty much a wrap on the hydraulic handbrake setup I'm going to do with the car. Obviously there's going to be a bit more work. I've got to run lines and also build like a lever with a paddle at the top so I can push on it, but we'll do that in a future episode. If I try and get every little part of the hydraulic handbrake all done in one video, I'll never get any videos out. So pretty happy with how all that ended up. Obviously we've got the actual handbrake itself mounted to the seat rail. Then we've got the booster that's going to give me a bit more oomph to those rear tyres to lock it up. And then I got the reservoir and the dual calipers on the rear here. So should be really good. Be able to do some pretty sick handbrake turns now. So pretty keen. Next thing we're going to focus on is the arse end here. Get the bash bar set up all done. There's quite a bit involved in that too, so stay tuned for that one. I'll see you at the next episode. Give me a high five. High five. Yes. What an amazing puppo. Do it again. Do you want to do more tricks? High five. Come on. No. A bit closer. There we go. Oh, you got there in the end, mate. That's the main thing. You got there in the end.